The coffee was still steaming when my wife delivered the news that would change everything. "Grant, honey, I need to ask you a favor." Mara's voice carried that particular tone she used when the favor wasn't really optional. She stood by our granite kitchen counter, perfectly styled even at 7 in the morning, her auburn hair catching the light from our bay window. I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been reviewing quarterly reports for Henderson Financial. At 43, I'd learned to read the warning signs in my wife's voice like a meteorologist tracking storm patterns. "What kind of favor?" I asked, though something in my gut already knew I wouldn't like the answer. "Rowan needs a place to stay for a few nights. You remember Rowan Kerrick, right? My old college friend? He's having some issues with his apartment, water damage or something, and he really needs our guest room." I remembered Rowan, tall, smug, the kind of guy who wore expensive cologne and talked too loud at parties, the kind of guy who made a point of mentioning how well he knew my wife back in their college days. "The guest room's fine," I said, returning to my spreadsheet. "No problem." "Well, actually," Mara's manicured fingers drummed against the counter. "The thing is, he has really severe allergies, cat dander, dust mites, that sort of thing. Our guest room hasn't been deep cleaned recently, and you know how Ross's cat gets into everything." I waited. There was more coming. "So I was thinking you could maybe sleep on the couch for a few nights, just until we can get the guest room properly cleaned. Rowan could use our bedroom. It's the only room in the house that's really allergen-free." The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. My wife wanted me to give up my bedroom, our bedroom, to her old college friend, the same bedroom where we'd slept together for 17 years of marriage, the same bedroom I paid for with my salary from Henderson Financial. "You want me to sleep on the couch," I said slowly, "so your friend can have our bed." "Just for a few nights, Grant. Don't make it weird." Don't make it weird. Right. I closed my laptop and looked at my wife. Really looked at her. Mara had always been beautiful, the kind of woman who turned heads at restaurant openings and charity galas. At 41, she still looked like the advertising executive who could sell ice to penguins. Which, come to think of it, was exactly what she was doing right now. "When is Rowan arriving?" I asked. "This afternoon, around 3. This afternoon. She'd already made the arrangements without consulting me. Of course she had. "I see." I stood up and walked to the coffee maker, pouring myself a fresh cup. The mundane action gave me time to think, to process what was really happening here. 17 years of marriage, 2 kids, a mortgage I'd been paying faithfully since we bought this house in Millbrook Heights, one of the nicer suburbs outside the city. I worked 60-hour weeks analyzing investment portfolios so Mara could drive her BMW and shop at boutiques that charged more for a handbag than most people made in a month. And now she wanted me to sleep on the couch so another man could have my bed. "Grant, you're being awfully quiet." I turned back to face her. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About allergies. Funny how they work." Mara's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "What do you mean?" "Nothing. Just that I've never noticed Rowan having allergy issues before. Remember your birthday party last year? He spent half the night petting Ross's cat." "People develop allergies, Grant. It's not that unusual." "You're absolutely right." I took a sip of coffee. People develop all kinds of sensitivities over time. The front door slammed, and our 17-year-old son Ross trudged into the kitchen, backpack slung over one shoulder, dark hair falling across his eyes in that way that made him look perpetually annoyed with the world. "Morning," he grunted, heading straight for the refrigerator. "Ross, honey, I need to tell you something," Mara said, switching to her mother voice. "Uncle Rowan is going to be staying with us for a few nights." Ross paused with a carton of orange juice halfway to his mouth. "Uncle Rowan? Since when is he our uncle?" "He's not really your uncle, sweetie. He's just an old friend of mine, but he needs a place to stay. And your father is going to sleep on the couch so Rowan can have the master bedroom. Ross looked at me with the kind of expression that suggested he'd inherited at least some of my ability to recognize nonsense when he heard it. Dad's sleeping on the couch? Why? Allergies, I said, before Mara could answer. Apparently your cat is a menace to society. Whiskers? She's like 14 years old. She barely moves. Apparently she's a stealth allergen distributor. Mara shot me a warning look. Grant, please don't be difficult about this. Difficult. That was rich. I was being difficult because I questioned why a grown man couldn't handle staying in a guest room like every other house guest we'd ever had. I'm not being difficult, I said. I'm just trying to understand the logistics. How long is this arrangement supposed to last? A few days, maybe a week at most. A week. 7 nights on the couch in my own house. Well, I said, setting down my coffee cup, I guess I better pack a bag then. Mara blinked. Pack a bag? If I'm sleeping on the couch, I'll need some clothes, toiletries, the basics. You don't need to pack a bag, Grant. You live here. Do I? The question came out sharper than I'd intended. Ross looked up from his orange juice, suddenly interested in the conversation. What's that supposed to mean? Mara asked. Nothing. Forget I said anything. I walked toward the stairs. I'll just grab a few things and get out of your way. Grant, wait. But I was already heading upstairs, my mind racing. Something about this whole situation felt wrong. Not just wrong, rotten. Like fruit that looked perfect on the outside, but was crawling with maggots underneath. In our bedroom, soon to be Rowan's bedroom, I pulled a duffel bag from the closet and started throwing clothes into it. Underwear, socks, a few shirts, some jeans, the basic necessities for a man who'd apparently been demoted to couch status in his own home. Mara appeared in the doorway. You're really going to make a big production out of this, aren't you? I'm not making a production out of anything. You asked me to sleep on the couch. I'm preparing to sleep on the couch. You know what I mean. The attitude, the sarcasm. I zipped up the duffel bag and turned to face her. Mara, in 17 years of marriage, have I ever asked you to give up your bed for one of my friends? That's different. How? It just is. Because your friends are more important than mine? Because Rowan is in a real bind, and we're in a position to help him. I slung the duffel bag over my shoulder. You're absolutely right. We're definitely in a position to help. Something in my tone made her step back. What are you doing, Grant? Exactly what you asked me to do. I walked past her toward the door. I'm getting out of the way. Where are you going? Does it matter? As long as I'm not on your couch when Rowan arrives, right? I was halfway down the stairs when she called after me. Grant, don't be ridiculous. Come back here. But I kept walking. Through the living room, past the couch that was supposed to be my new bed, and into the kitchen where Ross was still standing with his orange juice. Dad, what's going on? I stopped and looked at my son. Really looked at him. He had my eyes and his mother's stubborn chin, and right now he looked confused and a little worried. Your mom's friend has allergies, I said, so I'm going to stay somewhere else for a few nights. That's stupid. Yeah, well, sometimes life is stupid. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the back door, my car keys, my house keys, my office keys. All the keys that represented the life I'd built, the responsibilities I'd shouldered, the bills I'd paid. Grant! Mara's voice followed me as I opened the door. Don't you dare walk out of here. I paused on the threshold and looked back at her. She stood in the kitchen doorway, perfectly put together as always, but there was something in her eyes I couldn't quite read. Anger, maybe. Or fear. Thanks for the blanket offer, honey, I said, but I think I'll find somewhere with better thread count. And then I walked out of my house, closing the door behind me with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than a slam. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the distant promise of winter. I stood on my front porch, The porch I'd painted last summer, the steps I'd repaired the year before, and felt something shift inside me. For 17 years, I'd been the reliable one, the provider, the guy who fixed leaky faucets and balanced checkbooks and never complained when Mara spent $300 on a pair of shoes she'd wear twice. I'd been the invisible man in my own life. But invisible men, I realized, have certain advantages. They see things other people miss. They notice patterns, inconsistencies, lies dressed up as favors. I walked to my Honda Accord, practical, reliable, boring, and threw my duffel bag in the back seat. As I started the engine, I saw the curtain in our front window move slightly. Someone was watching. Let them watch. I pulled out of my driveway and drove toward downtown, toward the Riverside Inn, a modest hotel I'd noticed during my daily commute, but never had reason to visit. Time to find out what it was like to be a guest in my own city. The Riverside Inn smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and broken dreams. The desk clerk, a kid who couldn't have been older than 25, looked at me like I was either running from the law or having a midlife crisis. "Just the one night?" he asked, fingers poised over a keyboard that had seen better decades. "Let's start with 3, I said, sliding my credit card across the counter. "I'll let you know if I need more time." He processed the payment and handed me a key card. "Room 237. Elevator's broken, but the stairs are right there." Perfect. Even the hotel was giving me the runaround. I climbed 2 flights of stairs that creaked with each step and found my room. It was exactly what I'd expected. A double bed with a comforter that had probably been white sometime during the Clinton administration, a television that predated flat screens, and a view of the parking lot. I set my duffel bag on the bed and pulled out my phone. 3 missed calls from Mara. I deleted them without listening to the voicemails. Instead, I called my office. "Henderson Financial, this is Janet." "Janet, it's Grant. I'm going to be working from home for the next few days. Can you forward anything urgent to my cell?" "Of course, Mr. Solen. Everything all right?" "Just some personal matters to sort out. Nothing that can't be handled remotely. I'll make sure Mr. Henderson knows. Take care of yourself." I hung up and stared at the water-stained ceiling. Take care of myself. When was the last time I'd done that? When was the last time I'd put my own needs first instead of everyone else's? My phone buzzed. A text from Ross. "Mom's freaking out. Says you're having some kind of breakdown. Are you okay?" I typed back, "I'm fine. Just need some space to think. Tell your mom her friend can have the whole house if he wants. I won't be using it." The response came back immediately. "This is messed up, Dad." "Yeah, it is. But not for the reasons your mom thinks." I put the phone aside and opened my laptop. If I was going to be staying in a hotel, I might as well get some work done. But as I tried to focus on quarterly projections and market analyses, my mind kept drifting back to the scene in my kitchen. Something was off about the whole situation. It wasn't just the presumption of asking me to give up my bed, though that was bad enough. It was the way Mara had delivered the request. Too casual, too rehearsed, like she'd practiced the conversation beforehand, and the allergy excuse was nonsense. I'd seen Rowan at enough social gatherings over the years to know he didn't have any special sensitivity to cats or dust. Last Christmas, he'd spent an hour in our guest room helping Ross set up a new computer. No sneezing, no watery eyes, no complaints about allergens. So why the elaborate story? I closed my laptop and walked to the window. The parking lot stretched out below me, filled with cars belonging to people who had their own reasons for staying at the Riverside Inn. Traveling salesmen, maybe. People visiting relatives, people running from something. People whose wives had kicked them out of their own bedrooms. My phone rang. Mara again. This time I answered. "Grant, thank goodness. Where are you?" "Does it matter?" "Of course it matters. You can't just storm out like that. Ross is upset and I don't know what to tell him." "Tell him the truth. His mother needed the house for her friend, so his father found somewhere else to stay." "You're being ridiculous. Come home." "Home? I thought home was currently occupied by someone with severe allergies. There was a pause. Grant, I know you're upset. I'm not upset, Mara. I'm curious. Curious about what? About why a grown man can't handle staying in a guest room. About why you made these arrangements without discussing them with me first. About why you're so invested in making sure Rowan has the perfect accommodations. Another pause. Longer this time. He's an old friend. I'm trying to be helpful. How old a friend? What do you mean? I mean, how far back does this friendship go? College? High school? Further? Grant, what are you getting at? I'm not getting at anything, just trying to understand the history here. There's no history. Rowan and I knew each other in college. We've stayed in touch over the years. That's it. That's it. Two words that somehow managed to sound both dismissive and defensive at the same time. Okay, I said. Well, give him my regards. I hope his allergies clear up soon. When are you coming home? When I'm ready. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'll be in touch. I hung up before she could respond. The silence in the hotel room was deafening. Outside, traffic moved along the street in a steady rhythm, people going about their normal lives, unaware that Grant Solen was sitting in a budget hotel room, questioning everything he thought he knew about his marriage. I picked up my phone again and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Rick, it's Grant. You busy? Rick Donovan had been my friend since college. He was also a divorce attorney, though I'd never thought I'd have occasion to need his professional services. Grant, what's up, buddy? Haven't heard from you in a while. I need to ask you something, hypothetically speaking. Oh. Those are my favorite kind of calls. What's the hypothetical situation? I told him about Mara's request, about Rowan, about the allergies that didn't make sense. Rick listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I'd always appreciated about him. So let me get this straight, he said when I finished. Your wife wants you to sleep on the couch so her old boyfriend can have your bed. Old boyfriend? Come on, Grant. You said they knew each other in college. She's going to extraordinary lengths to accommodate him. She made arrangements without consulting you. Either she's having an affair with this guy, or she's planning to. The words hit me like a slap. You think she's cheating? I think you should find out. And I think you should do it quickly, before you end up like me. Rick had been divorced for 3 years. His ex-wife had cleaned him out financially and moved to Arizona with her personal trainer. How would I find out? Hire a private investigator, get some answers, and Grant, don't go back to that house until you know what you're dealing with. After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my hotel room and thought about Rick's advice. A private investigator seemed extreme, paranoid, the kind of thing suspicious husbands did in movies. But then again, sleeping in a hotel because your wife needed the master bedroom for her friend seemed pretty extreme too. I opened my laptop and did a search for private investigators in the area. The third result was for a company called Midwest Investigations, with an office downtown. The website was professional, but not flashy. The owner, Marvin Cross, had 20 years of experience in law enforcement before starting his own agency. I picked up my phone and dialed the number before I could talk myself out of it. Midwest Investigations, this is Marvin. Hi. I need some information about someone. Is that something you handle? Depends on the situation. Why don't you tell me what you need? I told him. Not everything, just the basics. My wife's friend, the suspicious circumstances, the feeling that something wasn't right. How long has this friend been in the picture? Marvin asked. Years, but he's never stayed at our house before. And your wife's behavior, has it changed recently? New clothes, new schedule, secretive about her phone? I thought about it. She's always been private about her phone. But yeah, there have been some changes. She's been working late more often, going out with friends more frequently. Mr. Solen, I'm going to be straight with you. What you're describing sounds like a textbook case of infidelity. The question is, whether you want to know for sure. Did I want to know for sure? 3 hours ago, I would have said no. 3 hours ago, I was the guy who trusted his wife, who believed in his marriage, who thought the biggest problem in his life was a quarterly report that wouldn't balance. But 3 hours ago, I was also the guy who slept in his own bed. What would it cost? I asked. For basic surveillance and background checks, $500 a day plus expenses. Most cases like this resolve within a week. $500 a day. It was a lot of money, but then again, I'd been supporting a household for 17 years. What was a few $1,000s to find out whether my marriage was worth saving? When can you start? Tomorrow morning. I'll need some basic information, names, addresses, work schedules. Can you meet me at my office around 9? I'll be there. After I hung up, I ordered Chinese food from a restaurant down the street and tried to focus on work. But the numbers on my screen kept blurring together, replaced by images of Mara and Rowan, of my son's confused expression, of the bed I'd slept in for 17 years. Around 11 o'clock, I drove past my house, just to see. Rowan's car was in the driveway, a silver BMW, newer and more expensive than mine. The lights were on in the living room, and I could see shadows moving behind the curtains. I parked across the street and watched for a few minutes. The front door opened, and Mara appeared, wearing the silk robe I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. She said something to someone inside, Rowan, presumably, and laughed. It was a laugh I recognized. Intimate, familiar, the kind of laugh she used to share with me. I started my car and drove back to the Riverside Inn, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Tomorrow, I would start getting answers. Tonight, I would try to sleep in a bed that smelled like other people's secrets. Marvin Cross looked exactly like what Central Casting would order for a private investigator. Mid-50s, graying hair, eyes that had seen too much and believed too little. His office was on the 3rd floor of a downtown building that had probably been impressive sometime around 1975. Coffee? He asked, gesturing to a pot that looked like it had been brewing since the Reagan administration. I'm good, thanks. He poured himself a cup and settled behind a desk covered with file folders and empty coffee cups. So, tell me about Rowan Kerrick. I'd spent the night at the Riverside Inn thinking about what I knew, which turned out to be surprisingly little. Rowan was around my age, maybe a year or two older. He worked in logistics for some company I'd never bothered to remember the name of. He drove expensive cars and wore expensive clothes, but I'd never gotten a clear picture of how he afforded them. He and my wife knew each other in college, I said. They've stayed in touch over the years. He shows up at parties sometimes, social events. Always seemed friendly enough. Any indication they were romantically involved back then? Mara always said they were just friends. Marvin made a note. What's his full name? Rowan Kerrick. Kerrick, I think. Address? I realized I didn't know. He's staying at my house right now. Before that, I'm not sure. Place of employment? Another blank. Some logistics company. I never paid much attention. Marvin looked up from his notepad. Mr. Solen, in my experience, when a wife starts bringing her old boyfriend around the house, the husband usually knows more about the guy than you do. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe you didn't want to know. Maybe some part of you suspected something was off, so you avoided getting too close to the truth. He was probably right. Looking back, I could remember times when Mara mentioned Rowan's name and I'd changed the subject. Times when he'd shown up at parties and I'd found reasons to talk to other people. I'd told myself I just didn't have much in common with him, but maybe I'd been protecting myself from seeing something I didn't want to see. What do you need from me? I asked. Photos, if you have them. Your wife's work schedule, any regular activities or routines. And I'll need you to stay away from the house while I'm working. The last thing we want is for them to know they're being watched. I spent the next hour giving Marvin everything I could think of. Mara's schedule at the advertising agency where she worked as a senior account executive. her regular girls' nights out on Thursdays, her yoga class on Tuesday and Saturday mornings. What about social media? Marvin asked. She's on Facebook, Instagram, the usual stuff. Are you friends with her on these platforms? Yeah, but she doesn't post much personal stuff. Mostly work-related things, pictures of the kids. What about Rowan? Is he connected to her online? I pulled out my phone and checked. Rowan Kerrick showed up in Mara's Facebook friends list, and when I scrolled through his profile, I saw several photos that included my wife. Parties, dinners, group shots from various social events over the years, but there was something else. In the background of one photo from a restaurant I didn't recognize, I could see Mara and Rowan sitting at a table together, just the two of them. The photo was tagged 6 months ago. Find something? Marvin asked. I showed him the phone. This was taken 6 months ago. Mara never mentioned having dinner with him. Could have been a work thing, maybe they ran into each other. Maybe. But I was thinking about the way they were sitting in the photo, close together, leaning in like they were sharing secrets, not the body language of casual friends who'd bumped into each other by accident. Marvin handed me a contract. Standard surveillance agreement. I'll start this afternoon and check in with you tomorrow morning. I signed the paperwork and wrote him a check for $1,500. 3 days of surveillance, plus expenses. It felt like a lot of money to spend on suspicion and paranoia, but as I walked back to my car, I realized it felt like a bargain compared to spending the rest of my life wondering. My phone buzzed as I was driving back to the hotel. A text from Mara. Ross has a soccer game tonight at 7. Are you planning to be there? I'd forgotten about the game. Ross played midfielder for his high school team, and I'd missed maybe 3 games in 4 years. He was good. Not scholarship good, but good enough to start as a junior. I texted back, I'll be there. The response came immediately. Good. We need to talk. We need to talk. 4 words that had never, in the history of marriage, preceded a pleasant conversation. I spent the afternoon at a coffee shop near the hotel, trying to focus on work, but mostly staring out the window and wondering what Marvin Cross was discovering about my wife. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected an update, but it was always something mundane, a client email, a calendar reminder, a text from Ross asking if I was okay. At 6:30, I drove to the high school. The parking lot was already crowded with parents and students, the familiar pre-game energy crackling in the autumn air. I found a spot in the bleachers and tried to act normal, whatever that meant anymore. Mara arrived 15 minutes later, scanning the crowd until she spotted me. She climbed the bleachers with the kind of determined expression that suggested our conversation was going to be more confrontation than discussion. Grant. She sat down beside me, close enough that I could smell her perfume. The same perfume she'd been wearing since we were dating. This has gone far enough. What has? This childish tantrum, sleeping in a hotel, ignoring my calls. Ross is worried about you. Ross is worried because his father isn't sleeping at home. Maybe you should have thought about that before you gave away his father's bed. I didn't give away anything. I asked you to make a small accommodation for a friend who needed help. A small accommodation. I turned to look at her. Mara, do you hear yourself? You asked your husband to sleep on the couch so another man could have his bed. In what universe is that a small accommodation? In a universe where people help their friends without making everything about themselves. The game started before I could respond, which was probably for the best. I watched Ross take the field, focused and intense, in the way that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with sports in the first place. The pure competition, the clear rules, the definitive outcomes, unlike marriage apparently. At halftime, with Ross's team leading 2-1, Mara tried again. I talked to Rowan about the situation, she said. He feels terrible about causing problems between us. He's willing to find somewhere else to stay. How generous of him. Grant, I'm trying to fix this. Are you? Or are you trying to manage this? What's the difference? Fixing it would mean acknowledging that you made a unilateral decision that affected both of us without consulting me. Managing it means finding a way to get what you want while making me feel like I'm being unreasonable for objecting. She was quiet for a long moment, watching the players warm up for the second half. When did you become so cynical? She asked finally. When did you become so manipulative? The words hung between us like a challenge. Around us, parents cheered and chatted, caught up in the normal rhythm of a Friday night high school soccer game. But I felt like Mara and I were having our conversation in a bubble, separate from the ordinary world of families and traditions and shared experiences. I'm not manipulative, she said. I'm practical. Rowan needed help, and we were in a position to provide it. I thought you'd understand. I understand perfectly. What I don't understand is why it had to be our bedroom. Why not the guest room? Why not the couch? Why not a hotel? I told you, his allergies are nonsense, and we both know it. She turned to stare at me. What are you accusing me of, Grant? It was a fair question, and I realized I didn't have a fair answer. Not yet. Not until Marvin Cross finished his investigation. I'm not accusing you of anything, I said. I'm just trying to understand why my comfort and my feelings seem to matter less than Rowan's. The second half started, and we watched in silence as Ross scored the winning goal with 10 minutes left in the game. I cheered and clapped, proud of my son, but part of me felt like I was watching the scene from outside myself. After the game, Ross jogged over to the bleachers, sweaty and grinning. Did you see that goal, Dad? I saw it. Beautiful shot. Coach says if we win next week, we're definitely making the playoffs. That's fantastic. I meant it. Whatever was happening between Mara and me, Ross deserved to have parents who celebrated his achievements. You guys want to get ice cream? Ross asked. The whole team's going to Brewster's. I looked at Mara, who was looking at her phone. I can't tonight, sweetie, she said. I promised I'd be home by 9:30. Promised who? But I didn't ask. I'll take you, I told Ross. Your mom can head home to her house guest. Mara's jaw tightened. Grant. What? Rowan's probably wondering where you are. Wouldn't want him to worry. She stood up, gathering her purse and jacket. We'll finish this conversation tomorrow. Looking forward to it. After she left, Ross and I walked to the parking lot together. Dad? What's really going on with you and Mom? I stopped walking and looked at my son, 17 years old enough to sense that something was wrong, but young enough to hope his parents could fix it. Your mom and I are working through some things, I said. It's not your fault, and it's not your problem to solve. But you're not coming home tonight. Not tonight, no. Because of this Rowan guy. It's complicated, Ross. It seems pretty simple to me. Mom's friend needs a place to stay, so you leave? That's messed up. Out of the mouths of babes. Yeah, I said. It is messed up. We got ice cream with Ross's teammates, and I spent an hour listening to teenage boys rehash every play of the game. It was exactly the kind of normal, mundane experience I'd taken for granted for years. Now it felt precious and fragile, like something that might disappear if I wasn't careful. I dropped Ross off at home around 11. The lights were on in the living room, and I could see two silhouettes through the curtains. Mara and Rowan, probably discussing their day. Probably discussing me. I drove back to the Riverside Inn and tried not to think about what Marvin Cross might tell me in the morning. My phone rang at 7:30 the next morning. I'd been awake for an hour, staring at the water-stained ceiling and wondering if there was any scenario where this situation had an innocent explanation. Mr. Solen? It's Marvin Cross. We need to meet. Something in his tone made my stomach clench. What did you find? Not something I want to discuss over the phone. Can you be at my office in an hour? I'll be there. I showered in water that alternated between scalding and freezing, dressed in yesterday's clothes, and drove downtown through Saturday morning traffic that seemed designed to test my patience. Marvin was waiting with fresh coffee and a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. "Sit down," he said. "This is going to take a while." He opened the folder and spread photographs across his desk like he was dealing cards. The first few showed Mara and Rowan leaving a restaurant together, walking close, his hand on her lower back. "Thursday night," Marvin said. "While you were at your son's soccer game, they had dinner at Chez Laurent downtown. Expensive place. They were there for 3 hours." The next photos showed them at what looked like a hotel bar, sitting in a corner booth, leaning across the table toward each other. After dinner, they went to the Marriott downtown, had drinks, talked for another hour. "Did they—" I couldn't finish the question. "Get a room?" "No. At least not that night. But Mr. Solen, I have to tell you, these people are not acting like old friends catching up." He showed me more photos. Mara and Rowan at a coffee shop, at a park, getting into his BMW together outside her office building. "How long have you been watching them?" I asked. "Since yesterday afternoon. But here's the thing. I also did some background research on Mr. Kerrick." Marvin pulled out a different set of documents. Rowan Kerrick, age 45, currently unemployed, lost his job at Morrison Logistics 3 months ago for falsifying expense reports. Unemployed. That explained why he needed a place to stay, but it raised other questions. "He's been living in a series of short-term rentals since then," Marvin continued. "Behind on rent, credit cards maxed out. But here's where it gets interesting. He handed me a property deed. 2 years ago, your wife co-signed on a house purchase with Mr. Kerrick, a lakeside property in Millfield about an hour north of here." I stared at the document. Mara's signature, clear as day, next to Rowan's. A house I'd never heard of, purchased with money I knew nothing about. She never mentioned buying property with him? According to the county records, she's listed as a 50% owner. Purchase price was $420,000. $420,000. Where had that money come from? Our joint savings account showed no major withdrawals, no unusual activity. "There's more," Marvin said. "I ran a background check on the property address. Utility bills show 4 occupants, 2 adults and 2 children." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "Children?" "Ages 7 and 5, according to the school enrollment records I was able to access. Emergency contact listed as Mara Solen." I set the documents down carefully, afraid my hands were shaking. My wife has been listed as the emergency contact for children I've never heard of? It gets worse. I drove out to the property this morning. Nice place, well maintained. Neighbors say the family's been living there for about 18 months. Woman matches your wife's description, man matches Kerrick's. The children call them Mommy and Daddy. The coffee I'd drunk earlier threatened to come back up. "You're telling me my wife has a second family?" "I'm telling you that's what it looks like." "But Mr. Solen, there's something else you need to know." He pulled out another document, a birth certificate. "The older child, a boy named Michael, was born 8 years ago. Your wife is listed as the mother." 8 years ago. I tried to remember what Mara had been doing 8 years ago. Ross would have been 9, Amelia would have been 7. Mara had been traveling more for work, I remembered that. Overnight trips to meet with clients, weekend conferences. "Is there any chance—" Marvin's voice was gentle. "Any chance your wife was pregnant 8 years ago? Maybe a pregnancy that didn't result in a child you knew about?" I thought back. Had there been signs? Morning sickness? Doctor's appointments? Changes in her body or behavior? And then I remembered. 8 years ago, Mara had gone through what she'd called a health scare. She'd been tired, emotional, making frequent trips to the doctor. She'd told me it was hormonal issues, stress from work. She'd even taken a leave of absence for 6 weeks, said she needed time to get her health back on track. I'd supported her completely, taken care of the kids, handled the household responsibilities, Never questioned her need for space and privacy, because I'd trusted her. Mr. Solen? Are you all right? I need to see this house, I said. I don't think that's a good idea. If they're there, they won't be there. It's Saturday morning, Mara's at yoga class, and Rowan is probably at my house eating my food and sleeping in my bed. Marvin looked skeptical, but he gave me the address. If you're going to do this, he said, be careful. Don't do anything that could be construed as trespassing or harassment. Just observe and leave. I drove north on Highway 47, past strip malls and subdivisions, past the normal Saturday morning bustle of suburban life. The address led me to a development called Lakeshore Estates, where houses sat on generous lots with views of Pine Lake. The house was beautiful. 2-story colonial, professionally landscaped, the kind of place that would cost twice as much if it were closer to the city. A swing set in the backyard, toys scattered on the front porch. I parked across the street and sat in my car, staring at the life my wife had built without me, a life that included children I'd never met. My phone rang. Ross. Dad, where are you? Running some errands. What's up? Mom's acting weird. She keeps checking her phone and looking out the window, and that Rowan guy is being really friendly, like he's trying too hard or something. What do you mean? He keeps asking me about school, about soccer, about you, like he's gathering information. It's creepy. I thought about Marvin's photographs, about the house I was sitting outside of, about the birth certificate with my wife's name on it. Ross, I need you to do me a favor. Don't tell your mom where I am or what I'm doing, okay? I'm trying to figure some things out and I need a little more time. Dad, you're scaring me. I know, and I'm sorry, but I promise I'll explain everything soon. Can you trust me for a little while longer? Yeah, okay. But Dad, whatever's going on, I'm on your side. After I hung up, I sat outside the house for another hour, watching for signs of life. A neighbor walked by with a dog and waved, like he recognized my car, like he thought I belonged there. Finally, I drove back to the city, my mind racing with questions that demanded answers. How long had this been going on? How had Mara managed to maintain 2 separate lives? Where had the money come from for the house? And most importantly, what was I going to do about it? Back at the Riverside Inn, I called Marvin. I need you to find out everything you can about those children, I said. Birth certificates, medical records, school enrollment, everything. That's going to take some time, and it's not going to be cheap. I don't care what it costs. Because I was beginning to realize that the cost of not knowing was going to be much higher than the cost of finding out the truth. My wife had been living a double life for years. She'd bought a house with another man, raised children I'd never met, built a family that existed parallel to the one I thought we shared. And she'd done it all while I was working 60-hour weeks to support what I thought was our life together. The betrayal was so complete, so thorough, that I almost had to admire the planning that had gone into it. But admiration was quickly being replaced by something else. Something that felt like the cold, calculating anger of a man who'd been played for a fool for far too long. Sunday morning brought rain and revelations in equal measure. Marvin called at 8 o'clock with an update that made my hotel room feel like it was shrinking around me. I've got the birth certificates, he said without preamble. Both children, Michael, age 8, and Sarah, age 5. Your wife is listed as the mother on both. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the carpet. And the father? That's where it gets complicated. The original birth certificate for Michael lists Rowan Kerrick as the father, but there was an amendment filed 4 years ago. Someone had Kerrick's name removed and yours added instead. My name? How is that possible? Fraudulent paperwork? Someone forged your signature on a paternity acknowledgement form. I've got copies here. The handwriting analysis will take a few days, but I'm betting it's not your signature. I tried to process this information. Not only had my wife given birth to children I'd never met, but she'd somehow legally designated me as their father without my knowledge. What about the younger child? Sarah's birth certificate has always listed you as the father. Filed when she was born 5 years ago. 5 years ago. I remembered that period clearly. Mara had been traveling constantly for work, stressed about a major account, distant and preoccupied. I'd attributed it to professional pressure. I'd been an idiot. Mr. Solen, there's something else. I contacted a source at the IRS. Very quietly, you understand. Your wife has been filing separate tax returns for the past 3 years. She's been claiming head of household status and listing dependents you've never heard of. Dependents? Michael and Sarah. She's been getting substantial tax credits and refunds based on these phantom children. We're talking about $47,000 in fraudulent refunds over 3 years. Tax fraud. My wife hadn't just been unfaithful. She'd been committing federal crimes and using my identity to do it. There's more, Marvin continued. I ran a check on Rowan Kerrick's legal status. He's got a prior conviction for identity fraud from 6 years ago. Served 18 months, got out 3 years ago. He's still on parole. Parole? And one of the conditions of his parole is that he can't co-sign financial documents or access other people's personal information. The property deed with your wife's name on it? That's a direct violation of his parole terms. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked parking lot. So what you're telling me is that my wife has been living a double life, committing tax fraud and violating federal law with a convicted felon. That's exactly what I'm telling you. And Mr. Solen, I think you need to consider the possibility that this isn't just about an affair. I think your wife and Kerrick have been planning something bigger. Like what? Like gaining legal control over your assets. Think about it. If they can establish that you're the legal father of these children, if they can show a pattern of you being absent from their lives, they might be able to make a case for custody and child support. Even if you divorce your wife, you could end up paying for children that aren't biologically yours. The thought hit me like a physical blow. All those years of working, saving, building a life, and it could all be taken away by a scheme I'd never even suspected. I need to see those tax returns, I said. I can get copies, but it'll take a few days. In the meantime, I'd suggest you contact your own accountant. Make sure your legitimate tax filings are in order. After I hung up, I sat in the silence of my hotel room and tried to figure out my next move. I could confront Mara directly, but that would tip her off that I knew about the house, the children, the fraud. Better to gather more evidence first. I could contact the IRS myself, but that would trigger an investigation that might take months to resolve. Or I could fight fire with fire. I pulled out my phone and called Rick Donovan. Grant, how's the hotel life treating you? Rick, I need your help, and I need you to keep this conversation confidential, even from your staff. Okay, now you've got my attention. What's going on? I told him everything. The house, the children, the tax fraud, Rowan's criminal history. Rick listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. Jesus, Grant, this is way beyond a simple affair. Your wife has been running a long-term con game. Can we stop it? We can try. First thing we need to do is protect your assets. Can you get to your bank tomorrow morning? Why? Because we're going to move your money before she figures out that you know. Joint accounts, savings, investments, everything goes into a trust that only you control. Is that legal? Perfectly legal. It's your money too, and you have every right to protect it from fraudulent claims. We'll set up an educational trust for Ross and Amelia, your legitimate children, and freeze everything else. I felt a spark of hope for the first time in days. What about the house? The house is trickier, since both your names are on the deed. But if we can prove she's been using marital assets to support a second family, we might be able to get a court order giving you exclusive occupancy. And the tax fraud? That's where things get interesting. If your wife has been filing fraudulent returns using your identity, you're a victim of identity theft. We report it to the IRS and let them handle the criminal investigation. Monday morning, I met Rick at First National Bank at 9 o'clock sharp. By 10:30, we'd moved $400,000 from joint accounts into a trust fund that listed me as the sole trustee and Ross and Amelia as beneficiaries. "What happens when Mara tries to access the accounts?" I asked. "She'll find out they've been closed. She'll probably call you in a panic. And then? And then you tell her you'll discuss it with her attorney." My phone started ringing at 11:15. Mara, calling from the grocery store where her credit card had just been declined. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 11:20, then 11:25. By noon, she'd left 6 increasingly frantic messages. Finally, I answered. "Grant, what have you done?" "I've protected my assets from fraudulent claims." "What are you talking about? I tried to buy groceries, and my card was declined. I called the bank, and they said the account was closed." "That's correct." "You can't just close our joint accounts without telling me." "Actually, I can. And I did." There was a long pause. "Grant, I don't know what you think is going on, but I know about the house, Mara." Silence. "I know about Michael and Sarah. I know about the tax returns. I know about Rowan's criminal record." More silence. "I know everything." When she finally spoke, her voice was different, colder, more calculating. "What do you want?" "I want you and Rowan out of my house. Today." "And if we don't leave?" "Then I call the IRS fraud hotline and report the identity theft. I call Rowan's parole officer and report the violation. I call Child Protective Services and report that 2 children are being raised by a convicted felon who's violating the terms of his parole." "You wouldn't. Try me." Another long pause. "Grant, we can work this out. We can—" "No, we can't. You've been lying to me for years. You've committed federal crimes using my identity. You've built a secret family while I've been supporting you and our children. Those are your children, too. You're listed as their father." "Without my knowledge or consent." "That's called fraud, Mara." I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. "What about Ross and Amelia? What about them? They need stability. They need their family intact. They need a mother who doesn't commit federal crimes. They need parents who tell them the truth. Grant, please, we can fix this." "No, we can't. Some things can't be fixed." I hung up and immediately called Ross. "Dad, Mom's been calling everyone, freaking out about bank accounts or something." "Ross, I need you to pack a bag. You're going to stay with your Uncle Rick for a few days." "What? Why?" "Because things are about to get very complicated at home, and I want you somewhere safe while your mother and I sort this out." "What about Amelia?" I thought about my 15-year-old daughter, who'd always been closer to her mother than to me. "Let me talk to her first." "But Ross? Whatever happens, I want you to know that I love you and none of this is your fault." "Dad, you're scaring me again." "I know, but I promise it's going to be okay." By 3 o'clock that afternoon, Rick had filed emergency motions with the family court, exclusive occupancy of the marital home, temporary custody of both children, restraining orders against Rowan Kerrick. By 5 o'clock, a sheriff's deputy was serving papers at my house. By 6 o'clock, my phone was ringing again. "You have destroyed everything," Mara said when I answered. "Everything we built together." "No," I replied. "You destroyed it. I'm just cleaning up the mess." And for the first time in 4 days, I felt like I was telling the truth. The family court hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning at 9 o'clock. I arrived early, wearing my best suit and carrying a briefcase full of evidence that Rick had spent 3 days organizing into a devastating timeline of deception. Mara sat across the aisle with her attorney, a sharp-faced woman named Patricia Vance, who specialized in high-conflict divorces. Rowan was nowhere to be seen, which wasn't surprising given that he was currently in county lockup awaiting a parole violation hearing. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Margaret Chen." Judge Chen was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and the kind of expression that suggested she'd heard every sob story and excuse in the book. She reviewed the case file for several minutes before looking up. "This is a motion for emergency custody and exclusive occupancy in the matter of Solen versus Solen. Mr. Donovan, you represent the petitioner?" Rick stood. "Yes, Your Honor. My client is requesting immediate custody of his minor children and exclusive use of the marital home based on evidence of ongoing fraud and criminal activity by the respondent." "That's a serious allegation, Counselor. I hope you have evidence to support it." "We do, Your Honor." For the next hour, Rick methodically presented our case. The forged birth certificates, the fraudulent tax returns, the secret house purchased with marital assets, Rowan's criminal history and parole violations. Mara's attorney tried to minimize the damage, arguing that the tax issues were misunderstandings and that Mara's relationship with Rowan was complicated but not criminal. But when Judge Chen asked Mara directly whether she had filed tax returns claiming children that her husband knew nothing about, Mara's answer was barely audible. "Yes, Your Honor." "And did you forge your husband's signature on legal documents?" A longer pause. "I may have signed his name on some forms, but..." "That's a yes or no question, Mrs. Solen." "Yes." Judge Chen made notes on her legal pad. "Mrs. Solen, you understand that what you're describing constitutes identity theft and tax fraud?" "Your Honor, my client was trying to provide for her children that she concealed from her husband for years while using his identity to claim fraudulent tax benefits." Judge Chen's voice was ice cold. "Ms. Vance, I suggest you advise your client about the serious legal jeopardy she's facing." The judge granted my motion for temporary custody of Ross and Amelia, exclusive occupancy of our house, and a restraining order requiring Mara to stay at least 500 feet away from our home. "Furthermore," Judge Chen continued, "I am ordering an immediate investigation by Child Protective Services regarding the welfare of the minor children Michael and Sarah, who appear to have been living with a convicted felon in violation of his parole terms." Mara broke down crying. Her attorney put a comforting hand on her shoulder, but I could see the calculation in Patricia Vance's eyes. She was already figuring out how to distance herself from a client who'd just admitted to multiple felonies in open court. After the hearing, Rick and I walked to the parking garage together. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like I've been hit by a truck," I said, "but a truck that was heading in the right direction. The criminal investigation is going to take months. The divorce will probably take longer. Are you prepared for that?" "I'm prepared for whatever it takes." That afternoon, I drove back to my house for the first time in a week. The key still worked, but everything felt different. Smaller somehow, like the rooms had shrunk while I was gone. Ross was in his bedroom, doing homework and pretending that his world hadn't just been turned upside down. Amelia was in the living room, staring at her phone with the kind of intensity that suggested she was trying to text her way out of reality. "Hey," I said, sitting down beside her on the couch, the same couch I was supposed to have been sleeping on. "Is Mom really going to prison?" Amelia asked without looking up from her phone. "I don't know. That's up to the courts and the prosecutors. Ross says she has other kids. Kids we've never met." "That appears to be true. Are they our brother and sister?" I thought about how to answer that. Biologically, no. Legally, it's complicated. But Amelia, none of this changes the fact that you and Ross are my children, and I love you. She finally looked at me, and I could see Mara's eyes in her face. "Why did she do it, Dad?" "I don't know. I honestly don't know." My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This isn't over." I showed it to Rick when he called that evening. "Probably Rowan," he said. "He made bail this afternoon. His parole hearing is next week, but his attorney might have gotten him a temporary release." Should I be worried? I'd be careful. Desperate people do desperate things. Maybe stay somewhere else tonight just to be safe. But I was tired of staying somewhere else. Tired of being the one who had to adjust, accommodate, make room for other people's schemes and lies. "No," I said. "This is my house. If anyone's going to leave, it's not going to be me." I made sure all the doors and windows were locked, checked the security system twice, and went to bed in my own bedroom for the first time in a week. At 2:30 in the morning, the motion sensors in my backyard triggered the floodlights. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept beside my bed and looked out the window. A figure was moving around my patio, trying the sliding glass door that led to the kitchen. Rowan. I called 911 first, then Rick. "Police are on their way," I told Rick. "But he's still out there. Don't confront him. Just stay inside and wait for the cops." But Rowan wasn't waiting for the cops. I could hear him trying to force the sliding door, the metal frame groaning under pressure. The door gave way just as I heard sirens in the distance. Rowan stumbled into my kitchen, wild-eyed and desperate. He was wearing the same clothes he'd probably been arrested in, wrinkled and stained. "Where is she?" he demanded, when he saw me standing in the doorway with the baseball bat. "Where's who?" "Mara. Where is she?" "I have no idea. And you're trespassing. You destroyed everything. Our house, our family, our life. Your life was built on lies and fraud. Those are my children. According to the DNA tests we ran yesterday, no, they're not." That stopped him. "What?" "Michael and Sarah. Neither one of them is biologically yours, or mine for that matter." The police sirens were getting closer. "You're lying. The test results are public record now. You can check for yourself, assuming you're not in prison." Rowan looked around my kitchen like he was seeing it for the first time. "She told me you were the problem. She said you were controlling, manipulative. She said you were keeping her from being happy. And you believed her. I loved her. You loved the idea of her, the fantasy she created, just like I did." The police knocked on my front door. 3 officers, led by a sergeant who looked like he'd handled his share of domestic disputes. "Mr. Solen, we got a call about a break-in." I pointed toward the kitchen. "He's in there. Rowan Kerrick. He's on parole and there's a restraining order." They arrested Rowan without incident. He didn't resist, didn't argue. He just looked defeated, like a man who'd finally realized he'd been played as badly as I had. After the police left, I sat in my living room and tried to process everything that had happened in the past week. 7 days ago, I'd been a husband and father living what I thought was a normal suburban life. Now I was a single parent with 2 traumatized teenagers and a criminal investigation swirling around my family. But for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. My phone rang. Mara. "I heard about Rowan," she said. "Where are you?" "Does it matter?" "Not really. Grant, I want you to know that I never meant for things to go this far." "What did you mean for Mara? What was the end game here?" "I don't know. I wanted something different. Something that felt real." "And our marriage didn't feel real?" "It felt like a performance. Like we were both just playing roles." Maybe she was right about that. Maybe we'd both been performing for so long that we'd forgotten who we really were underneath the act. "The children," I said. "Michael and Sarah. Who's their father?" "Does it matter now?" "It matters to them. They deserve to know the truth." A long pause. "His name is David Chen. He's a doctor in Chicago. He doesn't know about them." Another lie, another complication, another family that would be destroyed when the truth came out. "Mara, you need to get an attorney. A criminal attorney, not a divorce lawyer. The federal prosecutors are going to come after you hard." "I know." "And you need to think about what's best for Michael and Sarah. They're going to need stability, and they're not going to get it from you or Rowan." "I know that too." After she hung up, I walked through my house, turning off lights and checking locks. In Ross's room, my son was sleeping peacefully for the first time in a week. In Amelia's room, my daughter had fallen asleep with her phone still in her hand. They would be okay. It would take time and probably therapy, but they would be okay. As for me, I was 43 years old with a chance to start over, to build a life based on truth instead of performance, on reality instead of fantasy. I walked into my bedroom, not Rowan's, and got ready for bed. Tomorrow would bring more lawyers, more hearings, more complications. But tonight, I was sleeping in my own house, in my own bed, with my own children safe down the hall. For the first time in 17 years, that felt like enough. I turned off the light and closed my eyes, and the last thing I remembered thinking was how quiet the house was without all the lies echoing through it. In the morning, I would start figuring out what came next.